I ask unanimous consent to vitiate the quorum call.
Without objection.
Madam President, I'm starting to feel a little bit like a broken record. I'm here on the floor again to echo the concerns of my constituents and so many folks across our great country. People across the country are cautiously checking their bank accounts, and they're looking at the price of milk and bread and things that they have to buy every day. They're driving out of the way to see which gas stations even have gas, and when they do find that, they're looking for the lowest price. Just as we're starting to come out of the pandemic, prices are starting to rise, and our dollar isn't going as far. Why? Because Democrats want to spend their way out of a pandemic, and it really makes no sense. They're throwing trillions around like it's monopoly money. It's not targeted to those who need it most, but it's on policy items that only appease their base, far left, not even a majority of their party. They're flooding the zone with borrowed money like a credit card with no limit. They've done it with stimulus package early in the year, and it was disguised as a COVID relief package. And now they're getting ready to try the same thing again. Last week, Leader Schumer announced that the Democrats reached an agreement on a budget reconciliation resolution, which is like the pregame warm-up for the next reconciliation package. The price tag for that agreement has been set at $3.5 trillion. Let me take a minute to highlight what I think is wrong with the bill. First of all, I'm not sure how anyone can call this an agreement. One Democrat senator who doesn't appear to have been consulted on the so-called agreement in the first place said the package needs to be fully paid for. So let me translate that to you. That means we need tax increases. Last week we talked about the 30 new tax increases that will probably be in this bill. On the other hand, we've got Democrat senators saying it's okay if this package adds to the deficit. $3.5 trillion added to the $30 trillion that we're already in debt. We already know at least one senator wants the top line number to be as much as $6 trillion, while others are calling for $2 to $3 trillion, which, by the way, is still too much spending. It doesn't seem like everyone has fully committed to this so-called agreement. It appears the Democrats are in disarray when it comes to agreeing to this, announcing that there's agreement when they still have members of their own party arguing over the final top-line number and how it's paid for. That's a pretty interesting strategy. Only thing I can guess is that the strategy is really to pull the wool over all of our eyes, trying to sell the agreement of a top-line number as a win is like anything that saying that you've won the game after the first snap. Folks, you have to play the game. You can't go by the first quarter results. You've got to play the entire game. Second, I can't understand why some of my colleagues across the aisle are still trying to sell this tax and spending bill as human and soft infrastructure. Most people never heard of that. I haven't been up here long, but I know enough to know that there's really no such thing as human and soft infrastructure. For some reason, we keep adding definitions to Webster's dictionary. It appears that our Democrat colleagues have once again duped a few members of the media. They can't stop parroting this human infrastructure phrase. Let's just call the package what it is. It's a spending plan on progressive social justice policies paid for by the American taxpayers by 30 tax increases. It has nothing to do with infrastructure. Even if they could define what infrastructure of the human and soft variety is, I know reckless tax and a spending spree is not as catchy as soft infrastructure, but at least it's accurate. But lastly, and this is the most important part, there are costs associated with the level of spending that Democrats are laying out, real costs that hurt the American families. Whether it's fully paid for by tax increase or whether it adds to the deficit, it all boils down to the same thing: the cost to American families across our country. The small business owner, the operator, the manufacturing worker, the farmer, moms and dads, hardworking Americans across the country will be impacted at the absolute worst time, when they're trying to recover from a pandemic. Take the cost of tax increases on small businesses, for example. According to the Job Creators Network, 1 million, that's 1 million small businesses will feel the financial strain of tax increases through this bill. 1 million. Many of these small businesses are still struggling after being shuttered in place for a year, battling against government-induced workforce shortages. With only 8% of small businesses on a solid economic footing after this past year, only 8% of our small businesses are really actually getting back on their feet. We should be working to help every small business see the light at the end of the tunnel, not increasing the heavy hand of government and keeping them in the dark. It makes no sense. Then there's the let's just keep spending and add to the deficit approach. The cost of spending so much and adding to the deficit means more inflation. More inflation means your dollar doesn't go near as far as it has in the past. In the June jobs report, we saw inflation up 4.5%, and the consumer price index increased by 5.4%, the biggest monthly jump in over a decade. The rising cost of inflation means Americans are making tough choices on what is most important to them, like filling up your car with gas or buying food for your family. There's no reason why we should have to be making these choices. In a nation as ours and as great as ours, hardworking Americans shouldn't have to choose. American families are caught in the middle of rising prices and the Democrats' never-ending need to appease the far left. And then there's the Democrats' view of America, one where big government reigns supreme. Well, let me tell you, big government approach does not work, and it never has. Alabamians want big government to get out of the way because they know that big government programs only tie their hands and stifle innovation and growth. We need to give folks an opportunity, not a handout. And right now, Democrats are on the wrong track with that. A government-subsidized economic recovery is not an economic recovery, it's an entitlement state. We need to get back to work. Prosperity is not purchased through the expansion of big government. How many times have we heard that? The expansion of big government, safety net programs, government does not make people prosperous. Prosperity is found within the ideas of the American people. Always has been, and it always will. Democrats are signaling that they're okay with the cost of American families if it means that they can pay for a whole grab bag of far-left policies, like the expansion of Medicare, free college, and amnesty for illegal immigrants. If all of this wasn't bad enough, here's the worst of it. Our Democratic colleagues have taken their priorities that are too radical to pass the Senate and creating an if-then scenario with true infrastructure negotiations. Forced by far-left voices in their party, Senator Schumer and Speaker Pelosi have decided a massive spending bill that has nothing to do with the pandemic or infrastructure should hold actual infrastructure legislation hostage. If in their world, if we pass a partisan spending bill, then we can pass infrastructure. Well, that doesn't sit right with a lot of folks. By linking a bipartisan proposal to a partisan reconciliation package, our Democrat colleagues are showing their cards. The cards show that they really want this reckless tax and spend spree to pass, and they are fundamentally unserious about a true infrastructure package that would make needed improvements to roads, bridges, and broadband possible. And that's a shame. By tying budget reconciliation to infrastructure, the American people are the ones who will be left out to dry. I have always said I would be in favor of infrastructure. We all would be a great infrastructure deal where every penny of every dollar goes towards roads, bridges, broadband, and waterways. But the Americans, taxpayers, know they have to pay for it. They know eventually they'll have to pay for it, but they need something that they're putting their money into that they can get something back. But we cannot let a partisan tax and spend spree bog us down and hold back the American taxpayer. This summer, so many Americans are traveling across the country. This includes most of us who travel across our state, me across Alabama. As I have been on the road, I'm reminded once again that we need improvements to our infrastructure. It's more than just fixing potholes on a city street. We rely on infrastructure every day. During our drive to work, trucks moving our goods up and down the highways, when a ship leaves a port with cargo, or we just get on the internet. All those are infrastructure. Good infrastructure allows people to move freely, keeps our products flowing, and maintains Americans' competitiveness in the global economy. In Alabama, we've got 100,000 miles of public roads, and we need them to be in good shape. Driving on poor roads costs Alabama drivers a total of $4.2 billion every year. Because of things like vehicle, operating costs, traffic congestion, and car crashes, we can tell our roads need work. We've got 1,000 condemned bridges, 1,000, just in the state of Alabama. Out of 16,000 bridges, we have 1,000 that have been condemned that need to be repaired in the worst way. And in an increasingly outlying world, getting our rural areas access to reliable internet is more important than ever. Whether it's for work, health care, going to school, we need broadband across our entire state. Investing in our infrastructure is investing in our future success. It is way past time to step up on this act. The American people need help with infrastructure, and that's what we should be concentrating on. But despite that, our colleagues on the left still can't resist playing politics here. Before the actual bill text of the bipartisan infrastructure framework could be written, and before the pay-fors were negotiated, Leader Schumer has called a vote on the framework. Now, I know it's pretty hard to get a majority of skeptical senators to vote on anything, much less something that's not even been written yet. We don't even have the bill written, but we're going to vote on it. These are serious times that call for serious action, so we should be very careful considering this framework, not rushing towards arbitrary deadlines. As our country's economy is trying to recover from the pandemic, anything and everything we do has to be thoughtfully considered, especially when it comes to passing legislation that costs money in the long run. And this is going to cost a lot of money. Because this is the taxpayers' money. After all, your money, we owe it to the taxpayers to spend their money in the most efficient and effective way possible. Personally, I don't think it is ever a good time to raise taxes. But I can tell you the absolute worst time is when we're still coming out of an absolute global pandemic. There are common sense ways to pay for some of this new infrastructure spending. Chief among them is redirecting all that unused COVID money that the Democrats insisted on spending early this year, and there's a lot of it left. Let me be clear, raising taxes on the American people should be a non-starter for any potential bill. It certainly is for a lot of people. Folks, simply put, a dollar spent on traditional infrastructure is a dollar well spent. But it's got to be done in a smart and targeted way. And we can't allow Democrats to hurt Americans by creating an if-then scenario. Let's spend some time on the infrastructure bill and do it the right way. Then we can turn to debating all the spending that our colleagues on the left have their sights set on. But we have to do the infrastructure bill first. Hopefully, Congress can deliver the targeted results our country deserves, results that don't increase the tax burden on the American people. Throughout this debate, you can count on a lot of us to be a strong voice for making infrastructure work. For three or four things: Alabama, our neighbors, our country's rural areas, and the American taxpayer. We can get this done. Let's just do it the right way. Madam President, I notice the absence of a quorum.
Call the roll.
Ms. Baldwin.